Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Friday Business Intelligence Tip. Today is a little bit different session in that we are going to redo one that I did back about a month ago. It was a SQL Server stored procedure connection to Power BI. And as I did it, I had a fantastic presentation and realized I forgot to share my screen. So it didn't do you a whole lot of good. So I'm going to do it over again. This will be a quick one, about 8-9 minutes. I think we'll get through it. But I want to show you how to add a stored procedure to Power BI. I get asked the question a lot, can you use stored procedures? Oftentimes, tables and views just are a little bit more limited than stored procedures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump on over to Power BI desktop and we'll show you how to use a stored procedure. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to select the Get Data option inside Power BI, and that's going to bring up the wizard, and we're going to SQL Server for our connection. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to that. And then what that's going to do is bring up the connection dialog in SQL Server, and we'll put in our server name. And then one thing to note is you have to use import when you're doing the stored procedures. So that kind of trips people up occasionally. So that is one of the limitations that's currently in place. I keep hoping they're going to remove that, but right now you have to use import as the connection mode for stored procedures. And for those of you that are familiar with them, when you want to do a stored procedure, what you have to do is enter the stored procedure command here. And how you do that is you exec, then the stored procedure name. So I just created a real basic one called webinar that's out there. And then it takes a parameter. That's one. I just have one parameter that you pass it, the company number. And what this is going to do is give me a listing of my account units. Some people call them cost centers or departments in an organization. So you could just pass it that. Now, this procedure only takes one parameter, but if you do have more than one, you could just put a comma and then another one. And then if there's text values, you put them in single quotes, like, ABC, single quote. So just know that that's how you pass parameters to the stored procedure. This particular one just takes one parameter, and I'll pass it the company one. If I say okay, what it's going to do, the other thing that you got to do is you do have to give it the database when you're executing the SQL command directly. So I just have a database called testing, real imaginative. And if I select okay, it's going to go ahead and run that procedure, passing it the parameter and giving me back my sample set here. I'm going to go ahead and say load, and that's going to bring that data set into Power BI, where I then can use it just like any other table or view that's on the system. So while this is running, loading it to the model, when it comes up, we'll put it into just a basic table listing so you can see what that looks like. Nothing too exciting. So there it is out there, and it's got, I can put my account unit and a description in there, so you can just kind of see a basic listing of what's there. Just going to execute that on that data set. It's thinking long and hard here today. I'll put description in there. There we go. So now we have our lists of cost centers or account units and their descriptions. Now, I had hard-coded a value of 1 into that. What if you want to do something a little more dynamic, or that it changes? If I go over to this query and I say edit query, it's going to bring up the query, Power Query Editor window in Power BI. So what we're going to do in here is I'm going to say manage parameters, and I'm going to say I want to create a new parameter. Rather than just having a hard-coded value, I want to create a parameter where I can just change it on what's there. So I'll create a parameter called company, and I don't do anything else too fancy. I'll just make a parameter called company, and then I have to give it a current value. I'm going to make the current value 2 this time instead of 1. So I'll just say the parameter value is 2, say OK. If I did nothing more than close this right now, which I'll go ahead and do this, you're not going to see the result that you would expect. If I go ahead and close that, it's going to go ahead and run the query. It's going to do it again, working on it. And what you're going to see, my data set looks exactly the same. So while I created a query, or a parameter, I didn't do anything with that parameter. What I have to do is go back to my query. And after you create one of those parameters, you need to connect that to the query that you had. And what you'll notice is as I edit this, here's the query that's executed up here. And you'll notice it's still got that hard-coded 1 in there. What we need to do to make it use that parameter is we need to create a more of a formula based where it's webinar, and then we can say ampersand. And then what we're going to put in here on this query parameter, and it went over to the editor window, is after the ampersand, I need to append onto it the parameter. Now, it's tempting to just type in your company like that. And it won't take that necessarily because you need to do a data type transformation on it. And so you need to use, a little more of a wrapper formula on it where I need to say, that's a number that I'm dealing with, and I'm going to translate that to text. So it's going to translate that number parameter of company because it recognized that that was a numeric value that we were passing in there. And so I want to translate that to text just so it can add it into this thing. So now when it equates this formula, it's going to say exec STP webinar, and then it's going to append on the value of this parameter, which is 2 in this case. So if I go ahead and I say close and apply, now what should happen is it'll come back here. We'll see it running the query again, and my list should change here if all is well. It's giving me a warning the first time saying, are you sure you want to run that native query on there? And I do. So I'll say, okay. And now it's going to execute that. Now I get my list of company 2. So now that parameter is nothing more than, or that query is parameterized to use a parameter that's there. Now, you'd have to use different options then to drive that parameter value, but the query is now set to use that parameter to change its value. So rather than a hard-coded query, it's a call to the stored procedure with the parameter value. So now your goal is to get that parameter changed. So that's all there is to hooking up a stored procedure with a parameter. Now, one other thing I'll show you that is kind of key on this. I had a simple stored procedure, and I probably should have made it a more complex one with a type of text. Remember when I showed you at the beginning that if you do have text parameters, you need to surround them with quotes. Just keep that in mind, that if this was a string type parameter instead, I would need to put a single quote in there. And then after the parameter, I would need to say and another single quote. So it's basically creating a formula that's dynamically creating that string. So that's something that trips people up occasionally. Or if your parameters are different types, like data types, you may need to do something like instead of number, it might be date.toText. So just those are a couple things that if you do get some weird errors in your formula when you're calling it, it could be that you're not concatenating in quotes into that, or you are not casting the data type appropriately on that. But those are the most common errors I've seen with that. So that's it for as far as basically calling stored procedures. Hopefully you found today's session helpful, and we look forward to talking to you in the next Power BI. We're going to be skipping next Friday. I have another commitment to attend to, and then we'll be picking it up the week after. So thank you for watching, and we look forward to talking to you on the next Power BI session.